like hippies there to make Africa work, man.
All right. So,
Okay. Oh, it's a good song.
okay, we can play it later.
All right.
Exploring the Dark Continent.
Okay. Exploring the Dark Continent, Africa. Before we start, let's take a look at the map of Africa, starting right off, because we know Africa. People knew about Africa forever. I mean, people came from Africa, Italy and Romans and ancient Greece. They're right across, they knew about Africa, ancient Egypt,
Yeah, northern Africa,
right?
the coastline of
Yeah.
the Mediterranean and all
And
that.
that's why the map of Africa has like stuff mapped at the top of it. But if you look at the south of Africa and into the interior, there's nothing. Nothing there.
Yep.
Kind of looks like Greenland, half thawed out.
All right, so Europeans have known about the northern parts of Africa since before the time of ancient Romans and Greeks. Even though people knew about the Great Sahara Desert and about Egypt, very little was known about Central and Southern Africa until the Age of Discovery. At first, exploration of Africa was mainly around the coastal areas, as explorers such as Vasco da Gama and others looked to trade in Asia by sailing around Africa. But as time went on, some men began wondering what was hidden on the continent.
All right. What's hidden in there? That's why Africa is quite often referred to as the Dark Continent, because they don't know what's in there. It's a big dark spot.
Okay, so David Livingstone lived 1813 to 1873. David Livingstone was a Scottish missionary and explorer who exercised a formative influence on Western attitudes towards Africa. Family, early life, and education. David Livingstone grew up with several siblings in a single tenement room. He started working at a cotton mill company as a child and would follow his long work schedule with schooling during evenings and weekends. He eventually studied medicine in Glasgow before going on to train with the London Missionary Society for a year. He completed his medical studies at various institutions in 1840 in London, England.
Okay, so he was a missionary, but he was also a doctor, right? Missionaries, person that would go somewhere, they usually work for a religious organization such as the church or whatnot. So they would also be spreading trying to spread their religion as they do their other work. What do we call those today?
Missionaries?
Hippies. Hippies.
Okay, explorations of Africa. In the official role of a medical missionary, he set forth to Africa, arriving in Cape Town, South Africa, in March of 1841. A few years later, he married Mary Moffat. The couple would have several children. Livingstone eventually made his way north and set out to trek across the Kalahari Desert. In 1849, he came upon Lake Ngami, and in 1851, the Zambezi River. Over the years, Livingstone continued his explorations, reaching the western coastal region of Luanda in 1853. In 1855, he came across another famous body of water, the Zambezi Falls, called by native populations Smoke That Thunders, and which Livingstone dubbed Victoria Falls, after Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria the First. Okay, let's take a look at the map here, right? When people think about Africa, they don't really realize that Africa has, first of all, more than one desert that's very big. The Kalahari being the desert in the southern part of Africa, and the Sahara up north, right? We have the routes that you can see that Livingstone took on his exploring
Expeditions.
Expeditions, yeah. So he traveled east, west, north, south. This guy went everywhere in Africa.
Yeah, heavily. Yeah.
And if you were to compare this map with the first map we looked at, you can see that big empty spot in the middle of Africa is right where all his exploration took place.
He might have started on some coastal cities that were there, but
Well, of
yeah,
course,
then
you start at the coast.
yeah, then he went into the Central Africa.
Yeah, through the jungles.
All right.
Anything else?
So by 1856, Livingstone had gone across the continent from west to east, arriving at the coastal region of Quilimane in what is present-day Mozambique.
Interesting fact. Quatermain, does that name sound familiar?
Quatermain?
Quatermain, the famous fiction adventurer. Yeah, Alan Quatermain.
Yeah, like the poor man's Indiana Jones.
Discount Indiana Jones.
Okay, so upon his return to England, Livingstone received accolades and in 1857 published missionary travels and researches in South Africa. The following year, Livingstone was appointed by British authorities to lead an expedition that would navigate the Zambezi. The expedition did not fare well, with squabbling among the crew and the original boat having to be abandoned. Other bodies of water were discovered, though Livingstone's wife, Mary, would perish from fever upon returning to Africa in 1862.
Okay, there's lots to unpack here. First, we have the photo of Victoria Falls. And remember, that was called the thunder that smokes.
The smoke that thunders.
Or the smoke that thunders, okay.
One of those.
Thunder being like the sound a massive waterfall makes. The smoke is not really smoke at all. It's the mist formed from the sheer force of the water smashing off of the fall into the water below. Watch the video Multimedia 21 to get a good look of Victoria Falls, and it's got a good sound of the falls too. Now down here, when Livingstone's wife Mary died, they say perish from fever. You're looking at more than almost 200 years ago now. People didn't realize there was all these different types of diseases like malaria and
smallpox, coronavirus,
Corona 19, yeah, Ebola. So whenever these adventurers or these Europeans got sick and died from an illness in Africa, they just called it the fever.
All right. So Livingstone returned to England again in 1864, speaking out against slavery, and the following year published narrative of an expedition to the Zambezi and its tributaries. In this book, Livingstone also wrote about his use of quinine as a malarial remedy and theorized about the connection between malaria and mosquitoes.
So here, because his wife died, he was a doctor, he started coming up with doing work on this fever disease, which became known as malaria.
And this quinine is basically a big ingredient in, what is it, tonic water? Right? Tonic.
Yeah, it's...
And if you ever think of the traditional idea of British people drinking gin and tonics, they use this tonic water, and it was
a way of also purifying water, wasn't it?
Yeah. Quinine kind of destroys a lot of different things, but it basically, after drinking quinine for you have to drink it often to get the effects that'll kind of help against malaria. But that's one of the things why at least British people in Africa would drink a lot of gin and tonics.
And we're not telling you to drink a lot of gin and tonics, but tonic is good for you.
Yes, the tonic water.
Okay.
Livingstone undertook another expedition after landing at Zanzibar. That's an island, I think, right? Landing at Zanzibar in early 1866 and going on to find more bodies of water with the hope of locating the source of the Nile River. He eventually ended up in the village of Nyangwe, where he witnessed a devastating massacre where Arabic slave traders killed hundreds of people. With the explorer thought to be lost, a transatlantic venture was developed by the London Daily Telegraph and New York Herald, and journalist Henry Stanley was sent to Africa to find Livingstone. Stanley located the physician in Ujiji in late 1871, and upon seeing him uttered the now well-known words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?"
Okay, lots to unpack here. First of all, one of his explorations or expeditions he went to did was to find out the source of the Nile River. Everybody knew about the Nile, especially how important it was in Egypt, and they knew it was really long, but nobody ever has found the source of it, right?
Okay.
Even today, people, it's up in the air. What's the source of this? The other important event here to look at is you're American. The slave trade and slavery is a very touchy topic in America, right?
I suppose, yes.
But we also see when people look at it, it wasn't just the American at the time that were really endowed in the slave trade industry. You can see really how bad the Muslim people and the Arabic people were at collecting slaves out of Africa too.
Okay, so Livingstone chose to stay, and he and Stanley parted ways in 1871. Livingstone died from dysentery and malaria on May 1st, 1873, at the age of 60, in Chief Chitambo's village near Lake Bangweulu, North Rhodesia, now Zambia. His body was eventually transported to and buried at Westminster Abbey.
Okay, so here we got another explorer, the life and death. Let's look at some of the deaths. I mean, our last explorer, James Cook, we didn't really talk about it. He was killed by natives in Hawaii, and we had mutinies. We've had betrayal. A lot of
Sickness.
A lot of different ways people died, and here Livingstone got sick from dysentery and pooped himself to death. I mean, it's not funny.
Dysentery.
Or dysentery, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but in a way, it's kind of funny.
Okay, so his legacy. Livingstone has been positioned as a staunch abolitionist. So look up that word, it's underlined. Who believed in the dignity of Africans, the viability of commercial enterprises for the continent, and the imposition of Christianity despite indigenous spiritual beliefs. His findings contained hitherto unknown details about the continent that led to European nations seizing African land in imperialistic zeal, which some speculate Livingstone would have opposed.
And one of the most notorious countries that jumped on land was the Dutch, the Netherlands.
South Africa.
Eventually, it would be their downfall because they didn't exactly get the best piece of Africa, and they spent so much money trying to develop it. But anyways, we're gonna have something for you. Two things. We got Multimedia 22. It's true false questions, so listen carefully. All that information comes from the video. We also have a writing project for you, and this should be fun. Have fun with it. We have the multimedia with the Victoria Falls, and we'd like you to watch that. You can look at other videos of Victoria Falls as well, and we're going to have you do a haiku project. We'd like you to write a haiku,
which you should all remember from the earlier this year.
Yeah,
how to write them.
5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable. Write a haiku about the Victoria Falls.
So that'll be the writing assignment for this.
For this unit, yeah. All right, thanks everybody. Hold on. For Africa.